Molweni? Ninjani? Phila khonto. I want to start by saying millions of people living in formal settlements in South Africa. And I'm one of them. But I'm one of the lucky ones, because at least I've got education and at least I've got a job. But the challenge with living in informal settlement alone is that there is no proper sanitation. As many of us know, there's no running water that's just simply there all the time. But I think one of my biggest challenges came because I'm born and raised in an informal settlement. And I work with an NGO called Community Organization Resources Center. And every day it means I wake up from an informal settlement in Mkondo Square, run to Mowbray office, move from Mowbray back to Khayelitsha or to Nyanga, depending on which informal settlement I'm working on that day. And the reason I do this is because as part of being born and raised in an informal settlement, when development came in the early 90s, around 96, in Nyanga East, when finally houses were being built, or the start of it, we had to move. We were asked to move to get to Samora Machel. And for some reason, my mom refused to move. She said no. And one of her main reasons was, is there schools in Samora? Or is there a clinic in those early days? And back then, there was just houses being built. All the other services were going to follow. And she said, I've got 2 kids, me and my twin sister, and I can't afford to move without knowing what will happen. And so for this spark, then this question within me as I started growing up, because I couldn't understand, we had an opportunity to get a house and move out from a shack. But she said no. She would rather stay in Nyanga, in Kondo Square, where she knows the community, where she's part of the community. So the question then started, why do we have to move out? Why do we have to move out in order for us to get better sanitation? Why do we have to move out for us to get a tap in our house? And this sparked a question for me for quite some time that ended up transforming. What does it take to transform an informal settlement to a formal settlement? And then again, as we moved on in my life, another set of housing project came up, which was Delft. And there, I think I was in high school. We were asked, again, don't you want to move to Delft? She qualifies, she's an elderly person. And she refused on the same basis. I've got asthma, I've been to Delft, it's very cold. And so we stayed again in Nyanga. And so as I started going through school with these questions in my mind, why do we have to move out? Why can't we be developed where we are? And so I wanted to know then, what does it take and what profession can I go through? And so straight after matric, I went to work for power construction as a civil engineer intern. And one of the things I learned there, because I had civil engineers build all the roads and stuff. But as I worked through my year as an intern in civil engineering, I started learning all civil engineers were dealing with at that level. We're just constructing the top level. And what I wanted to know, what's the thinking process? If this is an informal settlement, what is going to take to transform it? And so happily, I heard about town planning. So I went on and studied town planning at CPUT, which wasn't the easiest course ever I'd come across. For one, I felt like the 12 years I've been in school from primary to high school, I was so unprepared. The English, getting to tertiary level, having to work with computers all of a sudden was a huge challenge for me. But also one of my biggest problems, for the first time in my life, I had my own bedroom. I had my own space, I had access to a shower. So all of these luxuries, so much that I was enjoying them more than being focused in school. So much that it took me 6 years to finish up a 3-year diploma. And I remember one time my mom said, I think you should stop this town planning thing. Go back to your dancing. But I realized I could still dance, but I wanted to know, what would it take for us to move out of an informal settlement? And so, finally, when this day came, that I graduated at CPUT, was the biggest day of my mom. But one of my biggest worries was that, okay, sharp, now I've graduated, got my national diploma in town planning, where do I go? Who do I work for so that I can serve this interest that I have in me? Because I've worked in Khayelitsha for land use management, and I saw how it takes just processing building plans. So definitely, that's not the town planning I wanted to do. And that's when I discovered Cork. And one of the things they taught me there, the first thing you have to do when working with informal settlements, come and listen. Don't come with your ideas. Don't come with how things should be done. Come and listen. Even though you come from there, but in this new one you're going to go to, whatever informal settlement, go and listen. Now I was surprised because I wanted to just get in there and design. And I was learning all about these principles that in order to build up a city, one, you need finances, right? And for an informal settlement, what does finance look like? And so they started teaching me about daily savings. They started teaching me about communities doing their own data collection so that they get to know them. So I started viewing my position and where I was as a support person. So for me not to go into informal settlements and create change, but to go and support the community, which is what the corners of the NGO was, is to say, how do we come to your settlement and ask you what would you like to do and help you at best to say, how can we help you do what you'd like to do? And with this being said, I'd like to take up one informal settlement that I recently worked on called Flamingo Crescent. Now, Flamingo Crescent is an informal settlement in the Lansdowne area, situated around the great industrial park, and there's job opportunities all around them. But the major challenge was that, just like any other informal settlement, there was lack of service and so many other challenges that come with informality, the flooding and all of this. So the question, if you were to develop them in an industrial area, would you have to move them out far from their livelihoods? And so we went in with all our partners, held a couple of meetings in Flamingo, trying to get to the listening phase, just to get the community to build trust with us so they're able to listen to what we do and who we are. And so when we listened to their story, we discovered that Flamingo was made out of 104 shacks with over 405 residents. We discovered that there were only 14 chemical toilets. What does that mean? It meant there's one toilet for every 7 shacks. But we all know shacks don't use toilets, right? If you have 14 chemical toilets, 405 people, what does that mean in the usage? It meant you have 1 chemical toilet being used on average around about 29 people per day. And so we looked at this, how do you help? But again, for us, this wasn't a new situation. If you go to any other informal settlement, you will come across these challenges. We discovered they only had 2 taps, which meant there's only 1 tap for every 52 shacks. In the year 2012, they were living without electricity. Now, even in the informal settlement where I live in, there's no electricity, but at least we've got some connections that we've made so we can survive. But also, so we said, with all this challenging, where do we start? Do we come in and said, well, you've got no electricity, then you need electricity. You've got no toilets, then you need toilets. So do we bring them in? But we said, okay, now show us on a map your challenges and show us if you were to relook in your own settlement, what is it that you would do differently? What is it that you would like to see changing? And so as you see, we followed this process where they were doing a mapping, they were doing design, and instead of us with my own AutoCAD studies to draw up and sit on a computer and draw a plan for them and say, there's a plan, actually bring in cardboards. Say, let's cut, let's measure each and every shack, then let's build the model of your community. How would you like your community to see change? Still, it will be shacks because we don't have funding for houses, right? Let's get to a point where we realize the dream for housing and all these other structures. Let's tackle first the basics so we can see how do we get to the next level. And so they came up with this beautiful plan that we see. The next step for us was to say, let's take it to the city of Cape Town, because between communities and the municipality, that's where the real partnership needs to be. It's not necessarily with us as outsiders, because we can come in and go as we feel, right? If we don't have funding, we won't be there tomorrow. But then the challenges will still be there. And the city, somehow, the municipality will still have to answer. And so we're in this space where we say, create partnerships between the city mostly and the community to build trust in each other and to see the potentials. And for the first time, we were not saying a community must go and toy and ask from the municipality, but they must come with their own development plans and say, municipality, here's what we would like to see happening. And so the municipality came in and they invested money, and we saw that the community started building up their own community. They started having up their own construction teams within the settlement. So much that when we were done with the construction in Flamingo, we saw that each and every shack had its own flush toilet. There was paved roads. Thank you. I wish the Flamingo people were here so that they can get it, because they did this. And then everyone had his own tap. And one of the things we started picking up was that people were starting to do their own gardens. So we'd only focus on the shack, but you would see people were putting these add-ons in between. But also one of the biggest challenges for Flamingo was that there were these little kids, and there wasn't an ECD center because they are sitting in an industrial area, right? And so as part of the plan, we started getting more other partners in and bringing them in and saying, help us build a community center. And so we built a crèche for the Flamingo kids. And the ladies from Flamingo, through some of the organizations they partnered it, they were taught how to teach their own kids. This got me thinking though. So we're done with Flamingo, and I started wondering, what if my own mother was involved in planning her own community? What if she had a say in her own community? Would she have refused to move? Or would she have been able to be in a place where she expresses what she would like to see happening in her own community? And this question born at me, and unfortunately I'll never know the answer. Because last year, exactly on this date, she passed on. And that will always be something that I wonder, what if she was involved? But also something happened to me last year, personally. I got awarded as a South African young planner for the work that I've been doing with the communities. But obviously an award comes and you start thinking, what does it mean? So for me now as an informal dweller, what does this mean? And my mom refused to move because she had to take care of her kids. But now if I were to move, what would be my stand? I think we all want to move at some point, right? But if I were to move, where would I want to move in? If I were to move, I would definitely love to move to a city. That's more, your social status doesn't determine where you live, first of all. Your color of your skin doesn't determine who you are. And in fact, even when professional comes, they don't come at you and see you as a person because you're an informal dweller, as a person who's lesser or who don't have ideas, but they come to listen to you. They come to have a space, because one of the things I've realized in doing the work that I do is that we all build our cities. But mostly, despite who we are, we all like to be approached with dignity and respect. Despite our levels, who we are, at what point of our lives we're in, we all like to be approached with dignity. We don't like someone coming and saying, here's what I think you should do, but we'd like to be approached and taken to a process. And so for me, that's definitely a city I would love to live in. Thank you.